Flash. Feelings, Michael?
I feel like it's so predictable for me to start every single one of my Flash breakdowns with, I'm mixed about this, but I'm mixed about this. There was a lot of good in that episode, but the episode wasn't executed in a way to highlight said good.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very like a going through the motions kind of episode for me. It wasn't bad. And a lot of the stuff it did stronger than some of the corny episodes in recent weeks. But it also didn't do them well. It just felt like it did them. And that was it. I've said my biggest issue with the presentation of Killer Frost is that she's treated like a child and that she's not treated like the woman that she is. And here we are, 4 seasons into Killer Frost being on Team Flash, and they're still treating her like a child. I'm not really fussed on the whole like millennial kind of like I'm a grown woman but acting like a teenager kind of vibe they're going for a presentation with the long artistic shirts of her making art. I'd care more about that story if they gave it more time. But right now, the only thing they get right with Killer Frost is when she's in costume with the amazing contact lenses, pushing ice out of her hands. And I want more from her than that. And the reason this episode bothered me so much is she wasn't even in the outfit this week. This was a very like no tights, no flights kind of episode, and that they did a lot of character work. But by doing a lot of character work, it highlighted the issues with the characters they've had long term in the first place. I like Caitlin and Killer Frost drama. I don't like that version of Caitlin and Killer Frost drama. Basically, she wanted to find the blue flame because it was, or the black flame because it was attracted to her blue frosty energy. And that made sense. But there was an awful lot of complicated stuff. Also, the fact they brought Caitlin's mother into it to help deal with it, and then Caitlin wasn't there for the first half of it. The balance was wrong for me. I did like in the end that Caitlin, her mom, and Frost all grew together. Susan Walters, who's appeared in Teen Wolf, The Vampire Diaries. There are other dramas I'm blanking on. I love that woman. She can act in a 40-minute episode better than most people can in a whole series. I love it. She had a lot of stuff to work with in that episode. And what she did as Caitlin's mom was great, particularly since that was a Frosty character. And no, I'm not talking about pushing ice out of her hands kind of Frosty. That was a Frosty character in the past. They did some great character work with her. I love the stuff with Caitlin and her family when it's done right. This was hit and miss for me. But I sound like I don't like Caitlin and I don't like Frost. I do love Danielle Panabaker, and she was one of my favorite actors and characters in season 1, but they always make both their characters feel like they're going through the motions, and I want more than that. Caitlin's concern over Frost was great. That's absolutely great. As I know you said, Sabrina, that's like how a big sister should act. That was nice and authentic stuff. But it led to another argument, and all those two characters seem to do is argue with each other. And I want more than that from them. I'm happy with how it ended. I thought the last 5 minutes of the episode were great. The family moments between Frost, Caitlin, and their mom now was lovely. I don't love Iris's time sickness story because I feel like it's not progressing quick enough, and I don't want another story where Iris is a damsel in distress in a supernatural story. I want Iris out there reporting, and even though we kind of got that in this episode, it never felt like it carried the stakes that it should have because it was only given like 3 scenes in a 40-minute episode. We need more than that. But I will say I did appreciate the West Allen scene at the start, seeing Barry and Iris together. Seeing Barry and Iris together was wonderful. But I do have an issue. I saw the writers at work in that they were like, Iris can't leave Coast City. Why? Because this sickness she has will get worse the more she moves, so she can't go back home. Well, then open a breach and take her there. It's just, the reason it gets to me is I know Candice Patton will not be filming some of the episodes towards the finale, which means that they're separating Barry and Iris when she is on screen, so that she won't be on screen in a few episodes down the line. And I'm not one of these crazy stans that's like, they have to be together 24/7. I just feel like it's obvious you're coming up with multiple reasons to separate them at this point. And I'm like, if you can't give Iris a decent report and storyline in Central City, we really need to be wondering about what your writing team's doing here. But that was an awful lot of criticism. I'd give the episode about a 7. It was fine. It just went through a lot of the motions that I hate about The Flash. I don't think it wasn't as worse of an offender as some of the recent episodes, but it could have been so much better because I know what the Flash is capable of. It was fine. I think we're moving in the right direction with the Caitlin and Killer Frost story. I'm so excited about the fact that Ronnie's coming back because I really championed Caitlin and Ronnie, and I feel like Caitlin's been lost for a story without Ronnie, and I've missed Robbie Amell on the show. I'm interested to see if the Black Flame, this grief monster we've talked about, really is Ronnie, or if it's just doing the whole grief thing, appealing to Caitlin and taking the form of Ronnie. But I think he's in more than one episode, so I can't wait to see what it does with him. I think that'll add another layer to the story, because I do feel like we're going around in circles with it, and you shouldn't feel like that with the big bad this early into the story. But
speaking of Black Flame, that thing you tweeted?
Yes, I think it is, yes.
Oh, okay. I was expecting like the Black Flame from Hocus Pocus.
It's basically, I feel like it's summed up on the surface. It's literally a black flame, but when it gets passionate, it turns into like a skull black flame.
It looks like venom.
It does. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. It's like this levitating skull. And now it's drawn towards Ronnie or Caitlin, and apparently it's going to be Ronnie. But I'm excited about where it's going. It's just taking a little while to get there. And while every episode is good, I'm probably being too hard on the show because I know the show's capable of greatness. So I'll give it a 7 and be nice.
That is very generous based on what I listen to.
Exactly. But speaking of going around in circles, I'm going to stop doing that. And I know there's a whole arc I haven't touched. And I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea and that I'm not excited about it, because I am. But I know Sabrina's even more excited about it. So please, 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 I will let you do it better justice and take the floor. And let's talk about Iris doing a Thanos.
Yeah, okay, yes. So to backtrack a little bit, I'm always more hard on the Flash than Michael is. So if he'd give the episode a 7, I'd give it a 6. I'd give it more of a 7, if Iris's arc had been an actual arc in the episode. But my girl dusted an entire person. Like, that woman is gone. Like, did it by accident. It was unprovoked, and she didn't even realize she did it. But
killed?
She turned into green dust, like, slowly. It was like the snap.
Oh.
Mind you, Reed.
Wait, who did this?
Iris, by accident. It's part of the time sickness.
Oh, I didn't know she had powers. I thought she was just a journalist.
Well,
Well,
we will unpack that in a moment.
We don't have to get into it. I'm starting at 0 knowledge, so we don't have to go there.
Okay. Well, we'll just say she has a spark of the Speed Force in her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, so she dusted someone after Tinya met her mom, who had this wonderful cryy story about how she gave her up for adoption when she was a teenager because her parents forced her to because she was so young, and she's regretted that decision her entire life, and she's always hoped that Tinya was able to have a good life without her. That's not what happened with Tinya, unfortunately. I believe she grew up in the system and was bounced from place to place and always felt like her mom didn't want her. Oh, and then she finds out her mom did want her, and then 2 seconds later, that same woman, when Iris has like a really bad like migraine-esque reaction to what's going on with her time sickness, she touches Iris's arm, and then she immediately disintegrates into green light. So trauma everywhere. And then they just bounce you over to what's happening with Caitlin. And I was like, I'm sorry, I no longer care about what's happening with Ronnie. I guess Iris just hit delete on a person and did it by accident. And she didn't even know what was going on. So that's where my head was at the end of the episode. Prior to that, I had mixed feelings about the whole Snow family situation, mainly because I feel like they just led us into the Caitlin's thought of her mom also being Frost's mom. I feel like that wasn't a conversation we had previously. So for her to be like, you're putting your daughter in danger, I was like, did she ever see her as her daughter? This is a new conversation for me, but I'll roll with it. Also, I think the weak part of the episode was that clearly Barry didn't need to be there, but they had to have him there, like you pointed out, Michael, because he and Iris need to be separated. But he spent the whole episode being told how he could lead, and then no one listening to him. And he's frustrated with the whole Team Flash. And then Joe has to sit on the couch to be like, it's because you need to be with your wife, but you're here. You're the one who left her in Coast City. Now you're in your feelings about it. And I was like, preach, Joe. But also, he can't go to Coast City because we can see the writing, and therefore he has to stay in Central City. Though, to be fair, Iris, he was like, I'm going to pack up my bag and I'll be right back. And Iris was like, no, I got this. You handle the team because of the Black Flame. And I was like, girl, he would literally let people die for you. I feel like this would not be a Barry reaction, but I'm just going to agree with both of you and be like, yeah, you're so cute. Be separated, I guess.
Yeah, and to say on your point about seeing the writing, I do agree. And that was bothersome for me because it felt like an awful lot was done in a kind of clever metaphorical way, except it wasn't done in that clever at all, because I was like, here comes the metaphor. And lo and behold, here came the metaphor. It was like, Barry was getting so frustrated because Team Flash weren't listening to him. And I was like, wait do you see, they're going to compare this to, he's really feeling mean, or he's really feeling sad about what's going on with Iris. Lo and behold, Joe pops and says, is this really what this is about? And I'm like, yes, the man is getting frustrated that his whole team won't listen to him. But they had to make it about what was going on with Iris. And I do get it's about what's going on with Iris. I do get that. But they're like, not.
I was counting.
I do get that. But they're not portraying it in that way. He's like, I need to be with you, Iris. She's like, well, I'll go back to Central City. Fine, let's go. Doesn't talk about her again for the rest of the episode, but everybody else tells him how he's feeling about it. Didn't like that in the slightest. Don't get me wrong, I'm the biggest Barry and Iris shipper in the world, but like, let them feel their own feelings instead of letting the rest of the characters around them tell them how they're feeling. Stop using these clever metaphors for storylines that have nothing to do with them to kind of get across how they're feeling. I that's a fantastic device, but in that episode it was not clear, and
it was clunky.
Yeah, it was very clunky. And like you said, they felt the need to do it not once, but twice. And like, Joe comes in as a source of wisdom, and 10 times out of 10, the scenes are phenomenal. But I felt like that was the rare example where the writing behind it wasn't really there. And they were just relying on Joe's incredible ability to do a pep talk, to do the work for us, instead of letting the writing do the work.
Yes, they were doing a lot of telling and not showing, which is what brings the episode down for me. Not in the Snow storyline. I feel like they were very strong in terms of how they wanted that whole situation with them to go forward. But in terms of Barry, Irish, and like the team, the fact that Allegra was like, you don't have to be here, right? You could go to Coast City and take care of Iris. And I was like, why are you the one telling him that? Like, obviously he knows that he could be in Coast City if he wanted to, but his wife told him to come back to Central City. And I think that rubbed me a little wrong because it just felt like something she wouldn't say to him. I was like, why are you giving him permission to go to Coast City? He just didn't feel like a leader this episode, even though they kept telling him that he was. It was just odd. It was really, really odd. And they did the thing that they did last episode where so in a previous episode, Barry had already came up with the solution to the situation, but they weren't on board with it. And they took, I think, 20 minutes of the episode for them to finally get on board with it through them coming to the same conclusion as he did. And in this case, he was like, in this episode, he was like, it's not really going to work. This isn't really something that we should be doing. It's dangerous, and for what? And then lo and behold, they figured everything that they were supposed to do out, and it didn't work because it was too dangerous. And he was right the entire time. He said it wouldn't work. And what happened? It didn't work.
Yeah. And I love, like I say, I will watch Susan Walters in anything. Phenomenal actor. And I really enjoyed Carla's work. But the thing is, I felt like that was not the right storyline to unveil the fact, oh, look, I have ice powers too. That was a good thread about 3 or 4 seasons ago. And they just kind of finally pulled it in an episode that was all about going through the motions. And then it didn't work in the end. And we were left at the end of the episode thinking, okay, but what was that episode actually about? Because I'm glad Frost learned a lesson, but like 4 seasons into her being a member on Team Flash, when they're consistently treated like a kid who needs to learn lessons, I don't think Frost learning another lesson is enough to justify a whole 40-minute episode that ultimately accomplished nothing.
Exactly. It's to speak on that, not for Frost, but for Iris, in terms of things that they went back into the bag to bring before us. That I loved that she got to tell Tanya about her mom, but fans were pointing out, like, why didn't you do that back when that was relevant to Iris's story? Because they did a little bit of it, and then they kind of just bumped her past as if she didn't find out that one, her mom didn't die, her dad lied to her, and that her mom was an addict, and that she also went on and raised her brother, and she didn't even know she had a sibling. And then she finds this all within a few episodes, and that woman is dying, and she dies the next episode, I think. And they were like, "That's so sad. Let's spend a few minutes on it, and then we're gonna move you past. Like, you didn't just lose your mom." And now in season 8, she's talking about that trauma, which I'm glad that she got to talk about it. I just wish she would get a whole episode, the same way that Chester got an episode, and Barry, I guess, would have got half an episode to deal with his. Actually, Chester got 2 episodes this season and then last season. So can we go back in the time vault and help Iris deal with her mama trauma?
Yeah, I feel like just to round this out, that's a good point, because I feel like the issue that they've done with Iris long term is kind of my issue with Barry in this episode, in that Iris has been on screen an awful lot of the Flash's run, not necessarily in the right storyline. They haven't given her what she deserves, and she's been stuck in a lot of plots by the numbers, whereas there could have been some great character moments, like her dealing with the loss of her mother, maybe the guilt she felt about not seeing her early enough, or maybe the understanding why she didn't see her for so long. There's so many layers to that, and that's a rich story they could have dealt with. And it's the same situation here with Barry in this episode, in that I am biggest Grant Gustin fan you'll find. But we've talked recently, I'm not this like crazy superhero fan. It's like, oh, if they're not in their outfits, it's a crappy episode. I'm not like that in the slightest. But I feel like Barry had no role in this episode, and yet he was like the third main character in it, which is great for a Grant Gustin fan. He was the third main character in it. He was on screen an awful lot, but he had nothing to do, in that he was going through a plot by the numbers. And that's exactly my issue with how they portray Iris over the years. She's on screen an awful lot, says an awful lot, but she could be doing so much more. That's not a slight on Candice Patton, and it's not a slight on the Iris character. It's just telling the writers, please give her more worthwhile stuff. Because like in this episode, she was going through the plot by the numbers, and then that moment stood out beautifully. Where's this been all along? Give her more stuff like that.
Retweet, for sure.
So yeah, all in all, decent episode of The Flash, but could have been so much better.
Yeah.